بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين نبينا ورسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ثم أما بعد سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. So we are here as normal every week on a Thursday, studying the monumental book compiled by Imam Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala in Ahkam, in fiqh, and that is Umdat ul-Ahkam min kalami khayr al-anam. And we discussed previously before that all the ahadith he mentions in here, they are the pinnacle of authenticity. They are the highest level of correctness and authenticity, sanadan wa matanan, in terms of their sanad, chain of transmission, and in terms of their matan, their text, because they are, Imam Maqdisi rahimahullah only has compiled the ahadith al-ahkam, and he took them only and only from the sahihain, from the sahih of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, and similarly the hadith compiled by Imam Muslim rahmatullah alayhi. And we are still inside Kitab al-Tahara, the chapter of purification, al-Tahara. So the fifth hadith, he says rahimahullah, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم الذي لا يجري ثم يغتسل منه ولمسلم لا يغتسل أحدكم في الماء الدائم وهو جنوب. So this hadith is recorded by Sayyidina Abu Huraira radiyallahu ta'ala an, and we've mentioned his biography many times previously, that he is from the foremost of the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with all of them. He is at the foremost of them in narrating the ahadith. He is the most memorizer of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam among all of the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. He says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or here that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم. None of you should urinate, akramakumullah. None of you should relieve themselves in water that is da'im, in water that is stationary, water that is stagnant. الذي لا يجري. For further explanation, which water that is stagnant, that does not flow. Water that in one side is there, it's in a particular space, a particular part of the land, then it doesn't flow, there's no flowing water. So none of you should urinate in water that is stagnant, that does not flow. ثُمَّ يَغْتَسِلُ مِنْهُ. And then cleanse themselves, wash themselves from it. So this is a prohibition from the Prophet ﷺ to urinate in water that is stagnant, and then purify and cleanse and bathe yourself from that water. وَلِمُسْلِمٍ. So this was the narration of Sahih Bukhari. Then Sahih Muslim, the same hadith, لَا يَغْتَسِلُ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي الْمَاءِ الدَّائِمِ وَهُوَ جُنُوبٌ. None of you should bathe themselves in water that is stagnant while he is junub, while he is in a state of impurity. So this hadith of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala an, what it does is it divides water for us. It divides water and classifies water into two types. One that is da'im, one that is constant, one that is stagnant, and one that is alladhi yajri. The other water is water that flows freely. Okay, and the ulama and the fuqaha have explained the tafasil, the explanations of the ahkam of these types of water in their books in great detail. So, what the prohibition here is from urinating in water that is stagnant and then cleansing yourself from that same water. And why is that? That is because if the water is stagnant, it doesn't flow, and then a person comes along and they urinate in that water, then that water becomes from being pure that purifies to being impure in and of itself. ثُمَّ يَغْتَسِلُ مِنْهُ. Then if a person tries to purify themselves from that water, that doesn't make any sense, because the water itself now has become najis. The water itself now has become impure. So it's akin to a person trying to purify themselves with something which is impure. So this is what the prohibition is from. In the notion of Sahih Muslim, none of you should purify themselves in water that is stagnant while they are in a state of impurity. Because if they go and jump in the water and they themselves are impure, then that is incorrect. What they should do is they should pour the water onto themselves. So, like I mentioned, that the ulama and the fuqaha rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'een have split water into the varying categories that they are, and they have mentioned this in their books in great detail. So if the water is flowing, and there is no stagnancy, it's not kept and it's staying in one place, but rather it is flowing, then if something which is impure, a small impurity falls into that water which is flowing, then that small impurity will not make the water impure, because the water itself is flowing, so it's cleansing and purifying itself. How about the water that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends from the sky? وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we send down from the sky water which is purifying. So that water will purify the water. But this is not the case for water that is stagnant, water that is only in one place. If the water is stagnant, like this hadith mentions stagnant water that maybe if you come across, you traveling and water is maybe in a pond or in a lake where there is water kept in one place and it's not flowing, it's not moving, it's stagnant, then there are three scenarios, three circumstances that can come about with that water that is stagnant, with that water that is not moving and not flowing. The first is if the water is a small amount of water. If the water is a small amount of water and something najis, something impure falls into that water, and it changes the color of the water, it changes the smell of the water, it changes the color of the water. These three things, if they are changed, the lawn, the ta'am and the rih, the color of the water, so say for example a lake, you pass by a lake and it's stagnant, it's a small amount of water, it's a pond maybe, let's say a pond, and it's a small amount of water and something has fallen into there and the water has changed color. Clearly this water now, it is najis, it is not pure water. Or you smell something, this water doesn't smell like normal water, it doesn't smell the way water should smell, then this is an indication that a small amount of water now has changed from being tahir to being najis. And the other thing is the taste of the water. If the water is small, it's a small amount of water and stagnant, and the water tastes different, doesn't taste like normal water, then this is an indication that the water now is not tahir, it's not pure, rather it is najis, it is impure. And this is by the consensus of all of the ulama and all of the fuqaha, that the water becomes impure if it's a small amount and it is stagnant. Small amount, stagnant, and its taste, its smell or its color has changed from the normal onset of water, then this is not allowed for a person to use when purifying themselves, making wudu or making ghusl, because it itself is impure. How can it purify you when it itself is impure? Okay, so that's the first scenario we have, when the water is a small amount of water. The second scenario we have is if the water that we find, it is a large amount of water. It's a large body of water. And if so something najis, something impure, falls into this water, into the water which is large, a large body of water, something which is impure, najis, falls into that water, but it does not alter the smell, it does not alter the color, it does not alter the taste of the water. These three things, they are not changed. Then the water will remain pure. The water will remain upon the origin that it itself is pure, and it is not najis, it is not impure. And how we derive this? We derive this from the hadith of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, which has been recorded by the Al-A'immat al-Arba'a, or you say the Ashab al-Sunan al-Arba'a, the companions or the compilers of the four Sunan. And we should honor that the compilers of the four Sunan, they are Imam Abu Isa, Muhammad ibn Isa ibn Sawra at-Tirmidhi rahmahullah ta'ala, number one. Number two, Imam Abu Dawud, Sulaiman ibn al-Ash'af as-Sijistani rahimahullah. The third being Imam Abu Abdul Rahman Ahmed ibn Shu'ayb al-Nasai rahimahullah, Imam Nasai. And the fourth being Imam Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Yazid ibn Majah al-Qizwini, Imam ibn Majah. So these four A'imma, they compiled the four books of Sunan. So they recorded this hadith in their four Sunan. And we should know that some of the ulama, or a group of the ulama, classified the hadith as da'if, as inauthentic. But we also have another portion of ulama that classified the hadith as sahih. And they are not small names. They are the likes of Imam Ibn Khuzaymah rahmahullah ta'ala, Imam al-A'imma. He is called as the Imam of all Imams, Imam Ibn Khuzaymah. He has his Sahih Ibn Khuzaymah. Likewise, Imam Ibn Hibban rahmahullah ta'ala, likewise the compiler of Sahih Ibn Hibban. Likewise, Imam al-Hakim rahmahullah ta'ala, they classified the hadith as Sahih. Of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, where he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث وفي لفظ لم ينجس. That if the volume of water totals a volume of 2 قلتين لم يحمل الخبث, then that water will not carry impurity, it will not carry filth, it will not withhold impurity if the smell, taste and the color is not changed. If the water is equal to 2 qullah, which is, so 2 qullah, this is in relation to a measurement that the Arabs had, which is, so one is qullah, 2 is qullatain, and the jam', the plural is qilal. So it's in reference to a jug or a jar or a container that they used to have in the ancient times, which would be called as qilal hajar. The qilal, the jars, the jugs of hajar. So they equate 2 qullatain equates to around 230 liters. Around about 230 liters. This is what equates to 2 qullah. But this is just a rough number, because like with all ancient measurements, when people they determine the measurement in nowadays, the liters and milliliters and whatever it is, the volume that we work with nowadays, obviously they didn't have that back then. So it's an estimate. Some may be a little bit more, some may be a little bit less, but roughly around 230 liters. This is 2 qullah. So إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. If water equates to 230 liters, 2 qullah lam yahmil al-khabath. Then if something which is impure enters into it, which does not change, does not alter the smell, does not alter the color, does not alter the taste, then that impurity will not render the whole body of water impure. If the water is stagnant, da'im, if the water is constant in one place, it doesn't flow, then if it's 2 qullah, if it equates to this measurement, lam yahmil al-khabath, then it will not become impure, it will not carry any filth, it will not withhold any impurity. So this is the second scenario, when the water is a great amount of water, which equates to 2 qullah, which is around 230 liters. Then if the characteristics, the awsaf of the water are not altered, then the water will remain pure and it can be used to purify oneself, to make a wudu from, to make a ghusl from. This is perfectly allowed. And the third scenario is if the water is da'im, the water is stagnant, It doesn't move, it doesn't flow, it's just there in one place. It's stagnant, and it is more than 2 qulla. It is more than 230 liters. So if some impurity enters into it, and it doesn't alter, then it will carry the same ruling as before. But if it does change the smell, the color, or the taste, then by the ijma', by the consensus of all of the fuqaha, then the water will become najis. The water will become impure. So these are the three scenarios we have with water that is da'im, water that is stagnant, as this hadith mentions. لا يقولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم الذي لا يجري ثم يغتسل منه. None of you should urinate in water that is da'im, water that is stagnant, that does not flow, and then perform ghusl or purify or wash or cleanse oneself from it. Because water that is da'im, water that is stagnant, if it is less than 2 qulla, if it's less than 2 qulla, and impurity enters, like urine for example, urine enters into it and it changes the color of the water, or the smell, or the taste, then this water, it becomes impure. So if it becomes impure, how can a person cleanse themselves from that same water? Because that water is impure. How can you cleanse yourself? You purify yourself with impurity. It doesn't make any sense. So the second, like was mentioned, Sahih Muslim, لا يغتسل أحدكم في الماء الدائم وهو جنوب. None of you should purify themselves from water that is stagnant while they are junub, while they are in a state of major impurity. Because if a person goes, like I mentioned, and they have a big tub, like in some places in the world they have big tubs of water which they go and they bathe themselves in. If they go in that water and they are junub, then because they are junub and they enter into the water, then that water becomes najis, that water becomes impure, because they are in a state of impurity. But rather what the person should do is, when they purify themselves, they should pour the water from the tub, from the container, from the vessel, onto themselves, and purify themselves that way. Not jumping into the tub, not putting your whole body there and making the whole water impure. Rather, you pour the water on yourself. So these are two hadith of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And when we continue the sixth hadith now, which is of again Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, we read the hadith عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا شرب الكلب في إناء أحدكم فليغسله 7 ولمسلم أولاهن بالتراب. وله في حديث عبد الله بن مغفل رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا ولغ الكلب في الإناء فاغسلوه 7 وعفروه 8 بالتراب. So Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, likewise again in Sahih Bukhari, as we mentioned, because the hadith in Umdat ul-Ahkam, they are only and only from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whenever a dog drinks from any of your vessels, then you should wash it 7 times. 7 times the utensil or the vessel or the container should be washed. وَلِمُسْلِمْ, and in Sahih Muslim, the same hadith is أُولَهُنَّ بِالتُّرَابِ. The first of the washing being with earth, with dust, with mud, with soil. And also in Sahih Muslim from the hadith of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiyallahu anhu, mentioned the biography later, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whenever any dog licks, so the first hadith mentioned when a dog drinks. This hadith is when a dog licks any of your utensils, then wash it 7 times and rub the 8th time with soil, with earth. So this hadith, or these two hadith from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala an and Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiallahu an, they tell us about the impurity, the najasa of the dog, of the canine. That it is not allowed for a Muslim to have a dog as a pet, except for a couple of circumstances. For example, the only circumstances where you are allowed to keep a dog is, number 1, if that dog is a kalb, which they call as mashia, a kalbul mashia, which is like a sheep dog. A dog that will protect the sheep and the cattle and the goats. It will keep wolves and other animals of prey, hunting animals away from them. This is one dog we are allowed to keep, a sheep dog, a kalb al-mashia. The second is a kalb al-sayd, a hunting dog, a dog which we use when we go in the forest, we go hunting, then we use that dog to hunt pheasants, hunt birds, rabbits, and the like. This dog is allowed to keep. And the third is a kalbul harasa, a dog of guarding, a guard dog, which a person keeps to protect their well-being, protect their house, protect their loved ones. So these are, and some people add into this also, if the situation arises like a person can have a guide dog, a person who is blind, then this is a darura that they have, a necessity that they have, a dog to guide them around, an animal to, if they have nobody else around them, they live by themselves for example, then there's no harm in having a guide dog, a dog to help them maneuver around to different places. But these dogs which a person keeps, a Muslim keeps, they are not allowed to be kept inside the living quarters, inside the residency of the house, inside the living room, inside the kitchen, inside the house. No, they are not allowed to be kept inside the house. Rather, they should be kept outside the house, in the garden, in the back garden, outside. It's not inside the house. So these hadiths show us the impurity of the dog. And here there is a qaida, there is a principle which we should keep in mind, and that is anything that is najis, anything that is impure, then it is also haram. Anything that is impure is haram to eat, but that doesn't mean that everything that is haram is impure. So this is something we need to get our heads around. Everything that is najis, everything that is impure and is ruling, then it is haram to devour. But not everything which is haram to devour is impure. Okay, I'll repeat that once more to try and, it takes a couple of times to think about it to get your head around it. Not everything that is najis, impure, is haram. Sorry, everything that is najis, everything that is impure is haram. Everything which our Sharia deems as najis, impure, is haram to consume. But not everything which is haram to consume is najis. Not everything which is haram to consume is impure. Okay. So the dog, since it is najis, it is impure, therefore we extract it is haram to consume. It is haram to eat dog meat because it is najis in and of itself. So how can a person fill their stomach with something which is impure, with something which is najis and full of khubuth? So before we discuss the hadith, we speak about Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiallahu anhu. Because we know Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, we mentioned his biography many times before. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiallahu ta'ala anhu al-Muzani, he was from, actually, even though he's not a very well-known Sahabi, but yet he was from Ashab al-Shajara. He was from those Sahaba who early on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ in Surah Al-Fath. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with the believers who gave you the pledge of allegiance under the tree, which was called as the Shajaratul Ridwan, the tree of pleasure, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared His pleasure for those Sahaba who they gave bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam under the tree of Ridwan. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiallahu ta'ala, and he was actually among those Sahaba. And he was from the 10 people who Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala sent to Basra to teach people. And among the people which he taught were the likes of Imam Hassan al-Basri rahmahullah ta'ala, Imam Sa'id ibn Musayyib rahmatullahi alayhi, Muawiyah ibn Qurra rahmahullah, and other than them. And he passed away rahmahullah ta'ala in the year 60 Hijri in Basra, and Sayyidina Abu Barza al-Aslami radiallahu anhu prayed his janazah prayer over him. So that's a bit about Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mughaffal radiallahu anhu, the rawi of the 7th hadith. So these hadith, like I mentioned, the main thing they mention is the najasa, the impurity of the dog, of the kalb. Okay, so they teach us that if a dog licks any utensil, then that utensil that vessel, that plate, that cup is to be washed 7 times and to be rubbed the 8th time with turab, with soil. Okay, and if likewise if a dog drinks from the vessel also. Okay, so these hadith teaches that najasa, impurity, is of different types. Not all najasa is the same. We can divide najasat, impurities, into, we can say, 3 levels. The most impure, then we have the medium impurity, then we have the lesser impurity. So the greatest of impurity, the most impure, is the saliva of the dog. The saliva of the dog. This is the most impure. What gives us this information that is the most impure, the highest level of najasa, of impurity? Because this hadith mentions how many times we must wash 7 times. And these are hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, the most highest level of authenticity. That the utensil, the vessel, the cup, the plate, whatever it was, must be washed 7 times with water, and the 8th time must be rubbed with soil, with dirt, with earth, with mud, with soil. This was what indicates to us that the highest level of najasa, the highest level of impurity, is actually the licking, the saliva that the dog has. Why is that? The hadith doesn't mention, but we can derive that perhaps maybe the reason is because the saliva of the dog contains so many bacteria and germs which are harmful for mankind, which are harmful for me and for you, for human beings. The saliva of the dog contains this. Hence why our Sharia dictates that if a situation arises where our utensils, our vessels have been licked by a dog, then because of the saliva that remains there, it must be washed 7 times in order to remove that saliva, the harm, that which is mudir, that which gives harm, and to, on top of that, the 8th time, other hadith mentioned the first time, with soil, with dirt, with mud. So the highest level of najasa is of the saliva of a dog. Okay, and you can say the middle level, the medium level of najasa is things which are required to be washed, but only once. Things which require, if they land on our clothing, they land somewhere in our residencies, they are on something, then it requires it to be washed, but not 7 times like this, like the saliva of dogs. Just to be washed once. For example, we find from that urine bowl. This, if it falls on our clothing, then Sharia requires us to wash our clothing. Like, for example, the famous incident when a man came into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, فَبَالَ فِي طَائِفَةِ الْمَسْجِدِ, and he urinated in one corner of the masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ أَمَرَ بِذَنُوبٍ مِّن مَاءٍ فَأُهْرِيقَ عَلَيْهِ, and the Prophet, he commanded that a bucket of water be brought and spilled on top of, washed away the urine that the man, he urinated on that part of the masjid. Because he didn't command that this urine be washed 7 times or 5 times or 6 times. Rather, he mentioned it only to be washed once with water. So urine is an example of a middle level of najasa. Okay? And the third example we have, which is the lesser form of najasa, of impurity, very quickly, we have a couple of minutes left, is like the madhi, which a person, he has madhi, which is the pre-seminal discharge. When a man is in a state of excitement with his wife, for example, and without irada, without any wanting, without any intention, he has some excrement leaves his private parts. This is called as madhi, and this requires not it to be washed, but rather for water to be sprinkled upon. Water to be sprinkled upon that part of clothing, and that is sufficient. Likewise, from this level of najasa, we find, for example, the urine of a young infant boy. The urine of a young infant boy, somebody who is less than 2 years old, who is being breastfed by their mother, then such a young infant boy, if they urinate on the person's clothing, then this doesn't require a person to wash that from the Sharia perspective. They should wash, but from the Sharia perspective, to get it pure again, then they do not need to wash it completely with water. They just need to spray and sprinkle water upon it to make the tahara, the purification of that piece of clothing. And this is not the case for the infant girl, the Jariya. The young girl who is less than 2 years old, if a young girl, she urinates on the clothing of a person, then that needs to be washed. And this is not any form of discrimination. The reason why this is because 1,400 years ago, and even perhaps in some cultures today, what happens is when there's a baby boy, normally people, they take the boy around to different places. They leave the house with the boy more often than the baby girl. A baby girl more often will stay at home with the mother. Therefore, easy access is there to wash the clothing if she urinates on the mother's clothing or any other clothing of the family members. If the baby girl urinates, then that urine can be washed easily. But if the baby boy is taken out to houses of friends, to the different places, marketplaces, whatever, then it may be difficult to wash the clothing. Therefore, the hukm was given just to sprinkle water on the area where the young baby boy has urinated upon. So these are the three basic levels of najasat that they are. One is the highest level, and that is the saliva of a dog, which must be washed 7 times with water, 1 time with soil. And the middle level is, for example, urine, which needs to be washed once. The things that need to be washed once is like a middle level of najasa. And the lowest level of najasa is that which doesn't need to be washed, it just needs to be sprinkled upon. And we gave the example of madhi, pre-seminal discharge, and the urine of a young infant boy who is being, the illa is they are being breastfed by the mother. So this hadith shows us the severity, the taghalluf, the severity of the saliva of the dog reaching the utensils and the cups, the vessels that we have in our house. This is to be avoided at all costs, as per the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, as we just mentioned. So we'll finish here. Jazakumullahu khairan. We'll pause for the adhan of Asr. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.